This is GamesAtWork.biz, your weekly podcast about gaming, technology, and play. Your hosts are Michael Martin, Andy Piper, and Michael Rowe. The thoughts and opinions on this podcast are those of the hosts and guests alone and are not the opinions of any organization which they have been, are, or may be affiliated with.
This is episode 540, Saucer Separation Button. Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another episode of GamesAtWork.biz, your weekly technology podcast. This is Michael Martin, freshly back from Terre Haute, and I'm glad to be back reunited with my podcast co-hosts, Michael Rowe and Andy Piper. Andy, how are you doing these days?
I'm well, Michael. Thanks for asking. And so, Terre Haute?
Terre Haute. Rhymes with haute.
Oh, okay.
It's in Indiana, of all places. So...
Wow.
The nice things trip. You learn on a podcast like this, right?
It's not Terre Haute and rhymes with boot.
I just want to give a shout out to Michael Rowe for keeping things rolling last week with our good friend e540.
Yeah.
Since neither of us could be
was awesome.
Part of the show.
I was very glad to find Ian, and not find him, but convince him to come back and have fun with us. It was loads.
To drag him kicking and screaming as a retired person to have to express an opinion on a topic.
Yeah, you know, the thing that struck me as I was listening to the episode is like, now that he's retired, I wonder how busy he might be.
Why do you think? No, that's not why I asked him.
Spend some more time writing, I guess.
Yeah, he could. Maybe like a third part of a novel trilogy.
Who knows?
So we have got some fun links to share this week. And Andy, we're going to start off with you because you have a new piece of shiny, new equipment that you've gotten off of Kickstarter, which kind of kickstarted our run of show. So let's talk about this great device you have for your phone.
The thing that you're showing.
Ooh. Did you hear that?
That noise was my MCON controller, which is a MagSafe connectable or magnetically attachable controller for your mobile device. So it kind of looks, it's pretty much the same footprint as my iPhone, whatever version I've got, the one that's 2 years old, it's 15, something like that. Connects on the back using MagSafe really nicely, even though I've got a case on my phone. And you press this button, it pops up so that the underneath the phone slides out a standard control pad with a D-pad and two joysticks, left and right, thumbsticks, and then your four buttons on the face, and then there's also four shoulder buttons. You can fold out the little wings, so it's more like a regular console controller, a bit more comfortable to hold that way. And the other thing you can do is fully detach the top section, which is the magnetic part, and prop your iDevice or mobile device on a table with a little kickstand instead, if you prefer. So yeah, it's quite nice.
So I haven't asked. Does it work with Android?
It does. Yes. They attach in case you don't have MagSafe or a key magnet on the back of your device. They've added one of those little easy to stick on rings in the box, which is quite nice. I have to say, I think this was a Kickstarter that was about 18 months ago. I backed it, and it's taken a long time, and they did some really nice updates through the campaign showing the iterations of the thing. And yeah, it's really nice device. The only thing is that a lot of mobile games are deliberately made for portrait mode because they're more casual games for when you're waiting for the bus or whatever and just swiping away, rather than the landscape mode that this expects, which has been my one annoyance, easily finding the games that it supports or that support it.
So sticking on this theme of controllers, there's another one that we were chatting about a minute or two before getting into the show itself, and this is the Anbernic wireless controller.
Anbernic. They make a lot of retro devices for these fairly small consoles that you can play retro games on these days.
And it has a very special feature, doesn't it?
So this is a story on The Verge that actually just came out today as we record about the new Anbernic controller, and it's a fairly standard looking console controller, not dissimilar to what I've just been talking about with the phone. And it's not the first one that has a screen in the middle between the thumbsticks or the other controls. Mm-hmm. Of course, we can go all the way back to the Sega Dreamcast for that kind of aesthetic, where you had a little display in the middle. But this one, as well as showing your battery charge and various other bits of information on there, it will show your heart rate.
I guess so you can calm down in your first-person shooter.
Exactly. Yes.
The one thing I was thinking about with the availability of various retro arcade tools on mobile, I'm wondering if any of those would, by definition, support a gamepad. And therefore, if you ran one of those arcade simulators, if it would give you more games.
One of the things that when I went into Apple Arcade on my phone, it was recommending was the Retrocade arcade simulator game. Yes, I don't know whether I also went to one that said it supported a controller, and it was immediately trying to do things in portrait mode. So, in principle, you still need to tell the game's framework on iOS to pump the gamepad through. In the case of the Anbernic, this is apparently incorporating the heart rate sensor, going back to this story, into the actual grips of the controller, which I think is quite interesting. There's a few other, interesting elements to the device. I'm wondering whether the people will be interested in integrating the heart rate sensor into games, or whether it will just be used for some kind of health tracking, or what their real thought is here. They haven't done any more than just sort of say it's coming soon, so it's a bit of a gimmick at the moment.
Well, they're not a development shop, though, are they? Does Anbernic write games as well?
No.
They're just a hardware manufacturer.
Yeah, they make all the hardware.
So I mean, if you think about all the other, not controllers, but devices that'll read other information, health information, whether it's a watch or a ring or what have you, in theory, those data streams exist, and an enterprising developer might be able to then incorporate that stream into doing something, like, for example, to suggest rest breaks, or to leverage, kind of like with Pokemon Go, that you want to get your heart rate up a bit, to maybe unlock a certain feature at a certain location because you're now exercising, and it can tell.
Or Pokemon Sleep, which I've been playing now for 2 years consistently, and using it as
Have you collected them all?
I haven't collected them all. I don't think it's actually possible to collect them all. I'm convinced that the reason they keep bringing out new Pokemon games is so that you'll always have to try collecting more. Is that not the reason?
Novel.
Well, the next set of articles that we've got here are all talking about how do you solve the puzzles, and how do you do them with a little bit of help from your, in this case, AI friends.
Well,
so this one... Is it?
I'm curious to hear your interpretations of both of these stories. Go on.
Well, the first one is around letting Claude play text adventures, and we've had over the last, we'll just say,
2 years.
Is it 2 years? It's been a while.
I think it's 2 years.
Various examples of playing Infocom games with large language models and having them kind of sort their way through things. And text adventures are certainly really well suited to this kind of thing, because it is essentially a chat interface, the game being one end of the chat, the LLM could be the other end of the chat. And for those that playing a game is rough and you want a Twitch type of experience, you could say, all right, here, hey, Claude, use my credits and go play this game for me, and let's see how you do. So we talked about this for 2 years, Michael, like you said, that this is a good test to see how the experience goes from a large language model, and how sophisticated can it be, and how far can it get, versus, is it just sort of flailing around and not knowing to go down the stairs or pick up the candlestick or the sword or whatever it might be, because many of these older and newer text adventures are not necessarily intent driven. There's not like three choices: pick up the stick, talk to the ogre, or run to the forest. It is intended to be open kind of set up. So that was going through my mind to begin with, but I really liked the way that this particular article from Boretti.me explains how to go about doing it, because this gives now some instruction sets about how might you use the harness, how might you connect the LLM, and then how might you be able to take it even further to maintain in memory what was the experience, and maybe draw some things out to create maps that weren't there before, and lots more.
So when they brought out the open sourced, what was the games that Microsoft recently open sourced from Infocom?
It was the Zork. Yeah,
Zork. Thank you. Of course, classic Zork. When they did that, I downloaded a Python interpreter and started messing around with that, and I made a little desktop UI in Python so I could play it with a sort of graphical wrapper and things like that. So that was quite fun as a programming task. And of course, giving the LLM the context for how to play these kinds of games is quite straightforward, especially with the older games. Although even with Zork, you had a very sophisticated range of things that were possible. That was one of the joys of Zork, and discovering how the game could be, or the tools could be used. So I agree. I think Fernando Boretti's blog post here is really interesting to talk about how he implemented this using a Python wrapper, being essentially a two-dimensional game with a text interface. It's interesting. The cost of running it is and letting it get creative is quite challenging, it seems, which is not completely surprising. I am a little bit tempted to have a go mess around with this myself, but I don't particularly want to spend a load of AI tokens on doing that.
I'm wondering if you could take this and restructure the code to run against a local Olama instance.
Oh, sure. You definitely
you're not
could.
Spending any money on tokens, right?
Yeah. You definitely could. It will all be about the efficiency and effectiveness of the models, right? And the commercial ones typically have been the more successful ones. You could also train your local model to more specifically understand how to do the game without having to use more of a general purpose one.
There was an article this week, and I forgot to put it in the show links, about it was a Git repo and some other things on how to have Claude code running locally on your infrastructure.
But it won't be. That can't be correct.
It can't be the whole thing, but
right.
But it was. I'm going to find it just for us. Maybe we can read it and talk about it next week. That way we're all knowledgeable on it. But because it was really interesting, and I want to give it a shot, given the capacity of my server here, and figured I'd give it a shot. So
I threw in both.
A one shot.
I threw in both of this link that we've just been talking about, the Text Adventure AI one, and also the one I'm about to mention, which is also using Claude Code in this case, as the tool to drive Roller Coaster Tycoon. I threw in both of these stories because I'd come across them both during the week at separate times, and I thought they fitted our general themes of the show relatively well, in that they talk about games. They're both, in this case, kind of retro classic games, and whether we like it or not, we've been forced over the last couple of years to confront the reality that is LLMs and these AI tools. And equally, I found this story really interesting. It's presented beautifully in a kind of classic Mac-ish, Windows-ish window style web page, with the isometric Roller Coaster Tycoon art animated in the background. and it's from a company called Ramp, and they talk about how they enabled Claude to run Roller Coaster Tycoon. It turns out that this is of an open source game at this point, and there is a CLI interface. One of the things that it shows Claude is not good at is the verticality, the three-dimensionality of the game, because it can't, it's used to the sort of flat surface and the management tasks of operating it, but it can't do what we can do as humans and creatively come up with building tall and awesome roller coasters. So I thought that was particularly interesting. They also had to do a lot more in terms of modding Open Roller Coaster Tycoon to enable this interaction with Claude. And again, I found that really quite interesting to see how they did it, although they also point out that they vibe coded the interface itself, which was a little bit disappointing.
I don't know. I mean, I love this because the idea behind a Roller Coaster Tycoon or Civilization or any of these games is that there are so many variables to try to optimize. And so the task at hand here was go optimize them all, right? In Roller Coaster Tycoon, you want your visitors to your park to be happy. You want them to not wait in long lines. You don't want them to be throwing up from hungry. From going on to the roller coasters that make them go crazy, and then the whatever happens gets cleaned up quickly enough because you don't want your park to be messy. So I mean, and it goes on and on and on. There's so many of those. So this is such a great example of where a game environment where all the variables are known, which is a simulation of reality, which you cannot know all the variables in reality, but you can in a game, to say, go optimize them all, go write bug reports and fix them.
And going back to our original thought processes when we started recording these shows way back in the day, it's one of those command interfaces where, you're learning through play how to optimize and manage large environments. You've got that rich data, you've got those dashboards, you can see, and as the game goes on, as you say, it gets more complicated to manage all of those tasks. Of course, now the brilliant minds in the west coast of America at the moment are insisting that this should all be automated away and we shouldn't have fun. But there you go. Right. That's
well, that's why we have agents to have fun for us, so we can enjoy the agent having fun.
Right.
Now, Andy, you found this isometric New York City version, and very similar to the 8-bit and structure and Civ.
This week's show brought to you by my reading habits.
Yeah, no, I'm glad for it, and I love it. And I was zooming in, really small in certain places where I could see the various forts.
This is another.
It doesn't zoom enough, though. I've zoomed all the way in, and I recognize some parts of New York quite well because there's like a restaurant in the park that I went to, and I found it. But yeah, it doesn't zoom in enough.
This ended up quite high on Hacker News and Lobsters this week. It's a isometric New York City where the person who created it had the notion of, well, again, there's AI now, and we can use that to recreate classic kind of graphics similar to what we're actually looking at in Open Roller Coaster Tycoon, or as Michael says, SimCity, those 1990s pixel art versions of representations of cities. What if I could do that for the whole of a real place? So again, I found the write-up of the process particularly fascinating. This is described different ways of finding map data and tile information. In fact, he ends up using Google Maps 3D tiles, and then having to train an LLM so that it's optimized for the task of creating this pixel art in a consistent manner so that it didn't all look completely disparate as you piece together the whole of New York City. I found it also really interesting that he struggled most with green areas, presumably Central Park, primarily trees, and the water. And he ended up just kind of throwing his hands up and giving up trying to do that. He also talks about how complicated it is to manage that zoom in that you've just described, and the over tiling, and depending on what you're looking at. I think it's cool to look at for me, intellectually, it was again more interesting, similar to the last two stories. Thinking about the process of doing it, and I think in all three cases, which are using this AI LLM technology, which we all have complicated feelings about, it's enabled interesting thought processes for the human behind it, as much as it has burned a bunch of tokens. And I really enjoyed those thought processes, as well as enjoying the aesthetic outputs. I'm frustrated that it all took large language models to achieve.
Well, I mean, we've seen examples of this where humans have built in Minecraft and elsewhere,
Yes.
similar kinds of things, right? And the digital twin, sure. But where I was going to go is that there's a digital twin kind of construct, whether we're talking about a city or a manufacturing line or what have you, that can be represented, right? Yes, Andy.
I would like to ask Michael Rowe what his yes and is, because I'd like to hear all of the angles here.
Yeah.
Yeah. My yes and is I think the aspect of this that I found interesting was the constraints that you put in place, right? Mm-hmm. Of how it was built.
Yes.
And then also the constraints in the experience, right? Because my first reaction, having played around with things like this all the time, was I want to turn it. I want to see the front of that building. Can't do any of that. It is truly just an image that you can zoom in that's giving you the isometric perspective.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And then looking at the perspective of creating this and the point that you're making on the amount of tokens, there's so many ways that this type of thing has been done in the past. To your Minecraft example, is having AI do this specific task proving something else that makes it valuable? Or is it just, I wanted to see if an AI could redo something that somebody else has done, and we've got bazillions of examples of that because it has consumed that knowledge already, and it is regurgitating it.
Right, exactly.
So the uniqueness of the experiment that was done here is what I'd like to understand more of.
I think that's a really good point. Yes, of course. I mean, SimCity 2000, which I think is what this is kind of modeled on, that's that graphical style. You also couldn't rotate the camera. You just had that one isometric view. But it's not like any of these three individuals have said, here's my entire idea to an AI model, and had it give it back the fully completed version, and such that there was no human in the loop and there was no iteration and process.
We're not there yet.
Some sophisticated. Well, I hope that I hope and believe that we will never be there, because I think that the creativity and the iteration and the what ifs comes from the human mind and not from the machines here.
Yeah.
It's
funny. I've been in discussions with people talking about how AI gets them sparked creatively. I'm like, well, it may be able to provide you examples of a bunch of stuff, but it's not creative. You are being creative in that case.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're guiding it much in the same way that you're guiding a trowel as you're laying the brick on the wall, right?
Another brick in the wall.
I realize and I understand that a landscape is a changing and an evolving thing, and it may not be evolving and changing minute by minute, but it certainly changes. So when I zoomed in on the airport, for example, there's all the construction going on at the airport. So if you link this example back to the story we were just talking about with Roller Coaster Tycoon, now you can do an awful lot of interesting modeling around what if I wanted to do traffic flow optimization? What if I were able to see data points, in more detail? Can I now change which traffic lights are doing what where? Or where might I put other traffic lights in to increase the flow of traffic and decrease wait times for people as they're trying to get around a city. There's so many ways that something like this allows for the same kind of digital twinning that the NVIDIA guys had been working on from the, what do they call it? Omniverse, I think, something like that. That the creation of this, and do you remember how long it took to create this, Andy, from your write-up? Don't remember.
No, I don't. I think it was quite a long time. It was a period of. Yeah, I'm going to have to go back and read it now.
But a while, right? So there's the what ifs. What if this could be done in generalistic real time? So now you can have people who are able to synthesize with their eyes and understand things and zoom in and out. And what if you could rotate it like Michael you want, and kind of dial into the real buildings? And what if you use this now to say, I want to open a new restaurant in New York City. Where would be a good place to do it? Right? And start to be able to ask good questions like that, and then have this be a wonderful interface to explain, well, if you're going to open a new restaurant that is of this kind, you want to put it here, 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 and here's why you might consider that. There's some really cool things that this could unlock. So the creativity is absolutely still there from a human perspective, but there's more to it. All right. So excitement. The next story that's in the list here was one from Inc. And I don't spend a lot of time reading this particular news source, but what caught my eye here, largely because I had been listening and hearing an awful lot about LVMH in the last year and change, is that Hermes has made a point that they're really driving unexpectedly, fully expectedly, that they're leveraging an artist to create the artwork that is starting to show up in their product lines and in their advertising and even more. And the thing with Hermes and the way that they function with the ateliers that are crafting the hand-created products, this is sitting exactly well with what they're doing from a construction on artwork, and they're zigging where a lot of other places are zagging. So I thought this was intriguing. It was certainly they call it fantastical styles, right? Because you're seeing things of octopuses with shoes walking around that could show up on an Hermes scarf and the like. So again, not surprising for the brand. And the further point on the article is that even as we're going more and more towards generation of artwork or clip art or other things, the human creativity still looms large in a number of places.
I thought it was interesting that they talked about the growing desire for hand-drawn work, authentic human-created work. And I was also really pleased to see that they chose to take this route.
Yeah, I actually agree with all of that. The angle I took looking at this story, one is some of the artwork kind of looks like it could have been AI created, but it's not, right?
Right.
And then the second part is it threw me back to a lot of the same art style from the late 60s and early 70s of like the keep on trucking guy with the big foot or the yellow submarine art from the Beatles or even some of the early Monty Python
there next
and the final one would be The Wall. So there were all these really bizarre kind of psychedelic, freaky artwork examples back then, especially when you get further down in the article of the two shoes kissing and the mushroom legs table, as I call it. Those to me are like 100% correlated with that art style from back then. And I enjoyed that. It kind of was a nice throwback, but still felt modern in another angle with the way they're doing it. So very cool. I'm not an Hermes person. I don't own any. I don't buy any. It's not my style, but this art's kind of cool.
You surprise me. Interestingly, since we're a game show as well, there was a thing with The Sims recently where they did a deal with Coach, and they have got a load of Coach items now in the game, which feels very 5 years ago in terms of like brand partnerships.
Yeah.
It's also interesting that they had, because Coach is a logo, a very recognizable logo that they wanted in the game, but they don't use English in the game. They use Simlish. There's an option to switch between the English version and so on. But the other thing that felt quite icky about the whole situation that I was watching a clip on yesterday was that they actually sent out a load of Coach gear to the
influencers,
the young YouTubers,
of course,
to encourage them to make this content. And EA has been through this buyout with Saudi and other individuals recently, which has upset a lot of people because there's a view that doesn't match the brand of The Sims in terms of like the playfulness and overall vibe of the game.
I have to ask, how do you say coach in Simlish?
I could not tell you, but I would just say boop or something like that. I have no idea.
That's pretty close, I think.
Okay.
I think you mispronounced that last. Whoop.
Yeah, maybe.
So I'm watching the time and we're getting close, but Michael, you had a fun piece of art story that you wanted to include here that is it's really tremendous when you take a look at it. So show notes.
Yeah, so just 30 seconds on it. This is actually, it's funny, when I first glanced at it, I thought they actually knitted the entire image, but actually it's someone looming together, to go back to your usage of loom in the last story. The old family photos cut up into strips and then loomed into pot holders. And it gives a really kind of a cool vibe. I just thought it was kind of a cool art project.
It is a cool project, I agree. And the color matching or the color combinations that they use with the loom to try to fit in with the vibe of the photographs is quite fun. The last thing I think we want to briefly touch on is this story on TechCrunch, which is talking about Netflix, which having grown up and to the right as far as it can do without just continuing to hike prices, is now becoming a social app.
I can't tell you how many times back in the EBO days, 20 years ago now, we talked about second screen experiences and watching shows together and all that crap. And it's like, I don't need another social platform. I really don't. I don't care what you're watching unless we're talking about it. And I don't want a social platform as TV.
It's funny you mentioned that, because the thing that I'm most excited about recently is that I can now disable YouTube Shorts from showing up in search results.
Ooh, that's a good thing.
Because YouTube Shorts just frustrate me, because that's not the way that I consume my video content, very broadly speaking. And I know that's a generational thing and lots of other things. But yeah, this seems to be...
Get off your lawn.
I know, right? This seems to be where Netflix is moving with podcasts and comments and so on.
30 more seconds on Get Off My Lawn. Have either of you guys gotten just totally sick of the number of companies that want some kind of survey?
Oh, yeah. No,
I swear, the survey deluge is insane lately.
I nearly wrote a blog post on this last year. I kept, for a month or over a month last year, I kept a folder of all of the review requests and survey requests I received from brands, and I, with the intent of writing a blog post, with metrics, everything from you've just been to a physical grocery store and bought a piece of broccoli, could you review it?
Yes, it was broccoli.
To all kinds of other things.
NPS doesn't write itself, though, guys. The NPS
I saw somebody on Mastodon today post a thing saying they got basically a reminder follow-up survey thing to a marketing letter that they didn't respond to.
Yeah.
I've received.
It's like, give me a freaking break. Don't need to instrument everything.
It's those KPIs. We're incentivizing the wrong things, folks.
Yep.
And I've received pre-experience survey requests as well.
Yes.
So before you have the experience, I want you to know that we're going to ask you about the experience, and you can start your survey right now, even before you've had the experience. Which is like, are you kidding me?
So please send your feedback about our show that you just listened to.
Yeah, we'll have a Bitly link.
Like us, follow us on your favorite podcaster.
And next week on Games at Work Does Tech Grumps, we'll I won't be here because I will be in Brussels for the annual FOSDEM Open Source Conference. But I will
Brussels or Brussels sprouts that you got at the grocery store that you have to do an NPS survey on.
I will tell you my review of the excellent food that I have in Brussels next week.
Yes.
Excellent.
You can do it beforehand. See you, everybody.
See ya.
You've You've been listening to GamesAtWork.biz, the podcast about gaming technology and play. We are part of the Blueberry Podcasting Network, and would like to thank the band Random Encounters for their song, Big Blue. You can follow us at our website at GamesAtWork.biz.